I still remember the weight of them in my palm, cold metal, worn smooth at the edges from years of wear. Jackson pressed them into my hand that last night before deployment, folded my fingers closed around them and said, "Hold on to these for me." His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He kissed me once, hard and desperate. Then he was gone. That was 8 months ago. He's been back for 3 weeks now, and he's never asked for them back. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the thing about Jackson Reeves is that he walked into my life like a force of nature, and I never stood a chance. We met at a dive bar in Norfolk, the kind of place where the beer is cheap and the music is loud enough to drown out whatever you're trying to forget. I wasn't trying to forget anything that night, just killing time before my shift at the hospital started. I'm a nurse, pediatric oncology, and sometimes you need a beer and some terrible pop music before you can face another 12 hours of sick kids and devastated parents. He was sitting at the bar in his dress blues, and I'm not going to lie. The uniform did things to me, but it wasn't just that. It was the way he held himself, shoulders back, spine straight, like he was carved from something stronger than ordinary men. His hair was regulation short, dark and neat, and when he turned to order another drink, I caught sight of his profile. Strong jaw, straight nose, and these impossibly long eyelashes that seemed almost unfair on a guy who already looked like he'd stepped out of a recruitment poster. I wasn't planning to approach him. Guys in uniform aren't usually interested in other guys, at least not openly, and I'd learned a long time ago not to put myself out there unless I was absolutely sure. But then he caught me looking, and instead of the usual glare or uncomfortable shift away, he smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one that reached his eyes and made something warm bloom in my chest. "You look like you've had a day," he said, and his voice was deeper than I expected, with just a hint of a southern drawl that made my name sound like honey when he asked for it. "Dorian," I said, extending my hand. "And yeah, you could say that." "Jackson," his handshake was firm, confident, his palm was calloused. "What kind of day are we talking about? Lost your keys day or something worse?" I found myself telling him about work, about the 7-year-old girl who'd finished her last round of chemo, and rang the bell that day about how her parents had cried, and I'd had to excuse myself to the supply closet to do the same. I don't usually open up to strangers like that, but there was something about the way Jackson listened, really listened, that made the words spill out of me. "You're a good man, Dorian," he said when I finished, and the sincerity in his voice made my throat tight. "Takes a special kind of strength to do what you do." "Says the guy in the Navy," I countered, trying to lighten the mood. He shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. "Different kind of strength. I just follow orders and try not to die. You have to watch kids suffer and still show up the next day with a smile. That's heroism." We talked until last call, about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in South Carolina, about joining the Navy to escape a town where everyone knew everyone's business and difference wasn't tolerated. He didn't say the words explicitly, but I understood what he meant. We'd both learned early how to hide parts of ourselves, how to move through the world wearing masks. When the bartender kicked us out, Jackson walked me to my car. The parking lot was mostly empty, sodium lights casting everything in an orange glow. He stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, something clean and masculine that made my head spin. "Can I see you again?" he asked, and there was vulnerability in the question that made my heart stutter. "I'd like that," I managed to say. He kissed me then, right there in the parking lot, and it was nothing like I expected. It was gentle, almost tentative, like he was afraid I might break, or maybe like he was afraid he might. When we pulled apart, he was smiling, and I realized I was too. That was the beginning. We fell into each other over the next few months with an intensity that should have scared me. Jackson had 3 months before his next deployment, and we spent every possible moment together. He'd show up at my apartment after his shifts on base, sometimes still in uniform, sometimes in civilian clothes that made him look younger, more vulnerable. We'd order takeout and watch terrible movies, or we'd just lie on my couch and talk, his head on my chest, my fingers running through his hair. He told me things I don't think he'd told anyone else, about the fear that lived in his chest every time he boarded a ship, the nightmares from his last deployment, the way he sometimes woke up convinced he was drowning. I held him through those nights, whispered reassurances into his hair, and felt privileged that he trusted me enough to let me see him like that. I told him about my own demons, about my parents who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years, since I'd come out at Thanksgiving dinner and my father had called me an abomination, about the patients I'd lost, the ones whose faces I still saw when I closed my eyes, about the loneliness that had become so familiar I'd almost stopped noticing it, until Jackson had walked into my life and reminded me what it felt like to be seen. We didn't talk about what would happen when he deployed. It felt like tempting fate, like acknowledging the future would make it come faster. But time doesn't care about what you're willing to face, and suddenly there was only a week left, then 3 days, then 1. That last night, Jackson showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and takeout from my favorite Thai place. We ate on the floor of my living room, backs against the couch, and tried to pretend everything was normal. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he thought I wasn't looking. After dinner, we moved to the bedroom and we made love with a desperation that left us both shaking. Afterward, lying tangled together in my sheets, Jackson traced patterns on my chest with his fingertips. "I need you to know something," he said quietly. "These last few months with you, they've been the best of my life. You make me feel like I can be myself, like I don't have to hide. That's a gift, Dorian. You're a gift." I couldn't speak. Tears were burning behind my eyes, and if I opened my mouth, I was going to completely fall apart. Jackson reached up and unclasped the chain around his neck. His dog tags dangled from his fingers, catching the lamplight. He pressed them into my palm, warm from his body heat. "Hold on to these for me," he said. "Keep them safe." I closed my fingers around them, feeling the engraved letters press into my skin. "Jackson, I can't take these. You need them." "I have another set. Regulation." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want you to have these. I want to know that a part of me is here with you. Safe." "When you come back," I started, but he pressed a finger to my lips. "When I come back," he said firmly, "we're going to figure this out. You and me. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know I can't imagine my life without you in it." He kissed me then, slow and deep, and I tasted salt. I wasn't sure if the tears were his or mine, probably both. The next morning I drove him to the base. We didn't say much in the car. What was there to say that we hadn't already said? At the gate I pulled over and we sat in silence for a moment. "Come back to me," I finally said, my voice breaking on the words. "I will," he promised. "I swear to God, Dorian, I will come back to you." One more kiss and then he was gone, disappearing through the gate with his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look back. I sat there until a guard tapped on my window and told me I had to move, and even then I could barely see to drive through my tears. The next 8 months were the longest of my life. Jackson and I emailed when he could, short messages that told me almost nothing about where he was or what he was doing. Military censorship meant most of the details were redacted, but I could read between the lines. I could hear the exhaustion in his words, the weight of things he couldn't say. I wore his dog tags every day, tucked under my scrubs at work. They became a talisman, a physical reminder that somewhere out there, Jackson was thinking of me. On my worst days, when I lost a patient or when the loneliness felt like it might swallow me whole. I'd press my hand to my chest and feel the metal there, and it helped. It helped to know I was holding on to something real, something worth waiting for. 3 months in, the emails stopped. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing, and I spiraled. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wore myself out at work, taking extra shifts because at least when I was busy, I couldn't think about all the terrible things that might have happened. My co-worker, Sasha, finally cornered me in the break room and made me talk. "He's military," she said gently, holding my hand across the table. "Sometimes communication blackouts happen. It doesn't mean the worst." I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her. But every day that passed without word felt like a stone added to the weight on my chest. Then on day 16, an email. Short, just 3 lines. "I'm okay, can't say more. Think about you every day." I cried so hard I had to leave work early. The emails picked up again after that, sporadic but steady. Jackson told me about the stars over the ocean, how he'd never seen so many before. He told me about the guys in his unit, the friendships forged in impossible circumstances. He told me he missed me, that he thought about our last night together, that he was counting the days until he could come home. I told him about work, about the new residents who were eager and terrified in equal measure, about the little victories that kept me going. I told him about the apartment, how empty it felt without him, how I'd started sleeping on the couch because the bed was too big and lonely. I told him I loved him in a dozen different ways and waited desperately for him to say it back. He never did. Not in those emails. But he didn't have to. I could feel it in every word he wrote. Month 7, he sent me a photo. It was grainy, taken on someone's phone, but I could make out Jackson in his uniform, standing on the deck of a ship with the ocean stretching endlessly behind him. He was smiling, but he looked thinner, older somehow. The caption read, "Counting down, not much longer now." I printed that photo and kept it on my nightstand, and it was the last thing I looked at before I fell asleep every night. Finally, after 8 months that felt like 8 years, Jackson sent the email I'd been praying for. "Coming home, 3 weeks. Be ready for me." I counted down those 3 weeks like a kid before Christmas. I deep cleaned the apartment, bought new sheets, stocked the fridge with all of Jackson's favorite foods. I took time off work, told my supervisor I needed a week for personal reasons, and she just smiled knowingly and approved it without question. The day Jackson was supposed to arrive, I was a wreck. I changed clothes 4 times, couldn't decide if I should pick him up at the base or wait at the apartment. In the end, he made the decision for me, texting that he'd catch a ride and meet me at home. I paced the apartment for hours, checking my phone every 30 seconds, jumping at every sound in the hallway. And then finally, there was a knock on the door. I don't remember crossing the room. 1 second, I was standing frozen in the middle of the living room. The next, I was yanking the door open, and there he was. Jackson looked exhausted. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with fatigue, and he'd lost weight, his face leaner and harder than I remembered. But when he saw me, his whole face transformed, lighting up with a smile that made my heart stutter. "Dorian," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. I pulled him inside, and we were kissing before the door even closed, desperate and hungry and real. He tasted like coffee and something indefinable, something that was just Jackson, and I couldn't get enough. We stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding clothes along the way, and when we finally tumbled into bed together, it felt like coming home. Afterward, lying in the tangle of sheets with Jackson's head on my chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my skin, I felt his hand move to my neck. His fingers found the chain there, the dog tags I'd worn every single day he was gone. "You kept them," he said softly, and there was wonder in his voice. "Of course I kept them," I said. "You told me to hold on to them." He was quiet for a long moment, and when I looked down, I saw tears tracking down his face. "I didn't know if you'd wait," he admitted. "8 months is a long time. I thought maybe you'd move on, find someone who could actually be here." I cupped his face, made him look at me. "Jackson, I love you. I'm not going anywhere." "I love you too," he said, and hearing those words out loud for the first time made something break open in my chest. "God, Dorian, I love you so much it scares me." We held each other and cried, and it was the most beautiful, terrible, perfect moment of my life. That was 3 weeks ago. Jackson's been back for 3 weeks now, and we've settled into a new normal. He's staying with me while he figures out his next steps, and we're learning how to be together in the everyday, mundane ways that are somehow more intimate than the dramatic goodbye and reunion. He makes coffee every morning, strong and black, and brings me a cup in bed. We grocery shop together on Saturdays, arguing good-naturedly about whether we need more vegetables or if frozen pizza counts as a food group. He comes to the hospital sometimes to pick me up after my shift, and my coworkers have stopped pretending they're not staring at the handsome military guy waiting in the lobby. We're figuring out the hard stuff too. Jackson has nightmares most nights, waking up gasping and disoriented, and I've learned how to bring him back gently, to ground him with my voice and my touch. He's started seeing a therapist on base, dealing with the trauma of deployment, and I'm so proud of him for doing that work. We've talked about the future tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Jackson has a year left on his contract and then he's done. He's applying to college, thinking about using his GI Bill to study engineering. We've talked about getting a bigger place together, maybe a house with a yard. We've even, in our most vulnerable moments late at night, talked about marriage, about what it would mean to make this official and permanent. But here's the thing that keeps circling through my mind. Jackson still hasn't asked for his dog tags back. They're still around my neck, warm against my skin, a constant presence that I've become so used to I barely notice them anymore. Except I do notice them, every time I shower and take them off. Every time I catch a glimpse of them in the mirror, I notice them, and I wonder. This morning, Jackson caught me touching them while we were having coffee on the couch. He'd been reading something on his phone, but he looked up and saw my fingers wrapped around the metal tags. "You still wear them every day," he observed, and there was something in his voice I couldn't quite read. "Yeah," I said. "Is that okay? Do you want them back?" He set his phone down and turned to face me fully. "Dorian, I gave those to you. They're yours." "But they're your dog tags," I said. "They have your name on them, your information. Don't you need them?" Jackson reached out and took my hand, bringing it to his lips. He kissed my knuckles, then pressed my palm against his chest, right over his heart. "I need you to understand something," he said. "When I gave you those tags, I wasn't just asking you to hold on to a piece of metal. I was asking you to hold on to me, my heart, my trust, my future. Everything I am, everything I hope to be, I put in your hands that night." My eyes were burning. "Jackson, I don't want them back, Dorian. I want you to keep wearing them. I want everyone who sees them to know that you're taken, that you belong to someone who loves you more than anything in this world. I want you to look at them and remember that I chose you, that I'm choosing you every single day, and that I'm never going to stop choosing you." A tear rolled down my cheek, and Jackson wiped it away with his thumb. "When I was deployed," he continued, "there were nights I didn't think I'd make it home. Nights when everything went to hell and I was sure that was it, that I'd never see you again. And in those moments, you know what kept me going? Knowing that you were here, wearing my tags, waiting for me. Knowing that I had something real to come back to. Someone who loved me enough to hold on to a promise for 8 months, without any guarantee I'd keep it." "You did keep it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You came back to me." "I'll always come back to you," Jackson said. "And I'll never ask for those tags back, because they're exactly where they belong, with you On you, part of you like you're part of me. I kissed him then, tasting salt and coffee and love, and felt the dog tags press between our chests, warm metal against warm skin. When we pulled apart, Jackson was smiling, that real smile that transformed his whole face. "There is one thing I've been meaning to ask you, though," he said, and suddenly he looked nervous, vulnerable in a way that made my heart clench. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped, completely stopped. "Dorian Sullivan," Jackson said, opening the box to reveal 2 simple silver bands. "I know we've only known each other for less than a year. I know we've spent most of that time apart. I know this is fast, maybe too fast, and if you need time, I understand. But I also know that I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life. You are my home, my safe harbor, my reason for everything. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the gift you've given me?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stare at this beautiful, brave man who was looking at me with his heart in his eyes, waiting for an answer. "Yes," I finally managed to choke out. "Yes, Jackson, of course, yes." His smile could have lit up the entire city. He slipped one of the rings onto my finger and I slipped the other onto his, and we were both crying and laughing and kissing, and I've never felt happier in my entire life. Later, lying in bed with Jackson's arms around me, his ring solid and real on my finger, I touched the dog tags around my neck. They felt different now, heavier somehow, weighted with meaning and promise and future. "I'm never taking these off," I said. "You know that, right?" Jackson kissed the top of my head. "Good, because I meant what I said. They're yours, just like I'm yours. Forever, if you'll have me." "Forever," I echoed, and felt the truth of it settle into my bones. The thing about love is that it asks you to be brave. It asks you to take someone's heart into your hands and promise to keep it safe, even knowing you might fail, even knowing the world might tear you apart. It asks you to trust, to hope, to believe in something bigger than your fear. Jackson gave me his dog tags and said to hold on to them. He never asked for them back because he never needed to. They were always meant to be mine, just like he was always meant to be mine, just like I was always meant to be his. And now, with his ring on my finger and his tags around my neck, I carry the physical proof of what I've known in my heart since that first night in the bar. That some people come into your life and change everything. That some love stories are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth believing in even when everything seems impossible. Jackson Reeves walked into my life like a force of nature, and I never stood a chance. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never see coming, the ones that knock you sideways and remake you into someone braver, someone better, someone capable of loving with their whole heart. I'm holding on to his dog tags. I'm holding on to his heart. I'm holding on to this beautiful, fragile, impossible thing we've built together. And I'm never letting go.